Hello, welcome to San Lando Soundwaves. I'm Nikki Robinette. Today we are reading week 32, day 156. Our reading is from 2 Kings 17, verses 6 through 23. Finally, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. It was in the 9th year of Hoshea. The king of Assyria took the Israelites away from their own land. He sent them off to Assyria. He made some of them live in Hala. He made others live in Gozan on the Habor River, and he made others live in the towns of the Medes. Israel is forced to leave the land because of sin. All of this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God. He had brought them up out of Egypt. He had brought them out from under the power of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. But they worshipped other gods. The Lord had driven out other nations to make room for Israel. But they followed the evil practices of those nations. They also followed the practices that the kings of Israel had started. The Israelites did things in secret against the Lord their God. What they did wasn't right. They built high places for worship in all their towns. They built them at lookout towers. They also built them at cities that had high walls around them. They set up sacred stones, and they set up poles to worship the female god named Asherah. They did that on every high hill and under every green tree. The Lord had driven out the nations to make room for Israel, but the Israelites burned incense at every high place, just as those nations had done. The Israelites did evil things that made the Lord very angry. They worshipped statues of gods. They did it even though the Lord had said, "Do not do that." The Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers. He said, "Turn from your evil ways. Keep my commands and rules. Obey every part of my law. I commanded your people who lived long ago to obey it, and I gave it to you through my servants, the prophets." But the people wouldn't listen. They were as stubborn as their people of long ago had been. Those people didn't trust in the Lord their God. They refused to obey his rules. They broke the covenant he had made with them. They didn't pay any attention to the rules he had warned them to keep. They worshipped worthless statues of gods. Then they themselves became worthless. They followed the example of the nations around them. They did it even if the Lord had ordered them not to. He had said, "Do not do as they do." They turned away from all the commands of the Lord their God. They made 2 statues of gods for themselves. The statues were shaped like calves. They made a pole used to worship the female god named Asherah. They bowed down to all the stars, and they worshipped the god named Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughter in the fire. They practiced all kinds of evil magic. They gave up following God's rules. They did only what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. All these things made him very angry. So the Lord was very angry with Israel. He removed them from his land. Only the tribe of Judah was left. Even Judah didn't obey the commands of the Lord their God. They followed the practices Israel had started. So the Lord turned his back on all the people of Israel. He made them suffer. He handed them over to the people who stole everything they had. And finally, he threw them out of his land. The Lord took control of Israel away from the royal house of David. The Israelites made Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, their king. Jeroboam tried to get Israel to stop following the Lord. He caused them to commit a terrible sin. The Israelites were stubborn. They continued to commit all the sins Jeroboam had committed. They didn't turn away from them. So the Lord removed them from his land. That's what he had warned them he would do. He had given that warning through all his servants, the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken away from their country. They were forced to go to Assyria, and that's where they still are. We are on page 175 in our book, The 7 Arrows. Let's consider our 7 questions. What does this passage say? What did this passage mean to its original audience? What does this passage tell us about God? What does this passage tell us about humanity? What does this passage demand of me? How does this passage change the way I relate to people? What does this passage prompt me to pray to God? The last half of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles records the fall of Israel and Judah. God had reached his limit, and the time of judgment came. God used Assyria, one of Israel's enemies, to capture Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom. Many Israelites died in the fighting, and others were exiled to live outside of the promised land in pagan nations. It was a terrible fate for God's people. Had they upheld their covenant commitment and been faithful to God, they could have lived in peace and experienced God's goodness in the promised land. But, like Adam in the garden, they were expelled from the land to live as exiles. God made it clear why he had acted in this way, and the people had continually rebelled and worshiped other gods. They failed to reflect God's image, choosing instead to fill the earth with sin and brokenness. God had to act. The people mocked his name with their actions, and the exile was further proof that God would not overlook ongoing, unrepentant rebellion. Thank you for joining us. We hope you will join us again tomorrow.